Hello my beautiful friends, welcome back to my channel. As always, I'm excited to have you back here again for a new episode. And if you are new here, hello and welcome. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of shocking true crime story I have for you today. And of course, please do subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. Now, before I get into the story, I have to give out a channel disclaimer, and that is my channel is not meant to show any disrespect towards the victims or the families of the victims that I talk about in these videos. The information that I share with my audience is simply just research taken from different sources of the internet and compiled into one video. And the main purpose of my channel is for educational and awareness purposes of the different types of crimes we face on a daily basis. And the content warning is that in this case, I will be talking about murder and kidnapping. So if you are sensitive to that kind of content, then viewer discretion is very much advised. Alright, I hope you guys are good and that you are ready for the second episode of this week. And today's episode is actually the first international episode to be covered here on my channel. So I hope I'll be able to give off a good presentation of it for you guys. But let me not waste any more time. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the heartbreaking case of Jessica Amy Chapman and Holly Marie Wells. Holly Wells was born on October 4th in 1991, and her friend Jessica Chapman was born on September 1st in 1991. Both these young girls were from a town known as Soham in Cambridgeshire in England. They were the best of friends and they did a lot of things together. They were always close, always spending a lot of time together, and they also went to the same school of St. Andrew's Primary School. On August 4th in 2002, Jessica was planning on going to see her friend Holly at her house for a nice barbecue with Holly's family and friends. Before Jessica left her house, she told her parents that she was going to give her friend Holly a necklace with the letter H engraved on it that she got when her and her family were out on a holiday trip. And after this, Jessica left her house at around 11:45 a.m. Now, this picture of the girls was actually taken on that day of August 4th in 2002 by Holly's mom at the barbecue that they were having that day. The girls were actually huge fans of Manchester United, and that is why they decided to wear these shirts on that day and just have matching t-shirts together. And the picture was taken just before they had to go and eat dinner with everyone else at the barbecue that day. Then at around 6:10 p.m., the girls decided to go up to Holly's room so they can keep playing some more. However, just 5 minutes later, Jessica and Holly decided that they wanted to go get some sweets at a local shop. So they left the house without telling anyone, neither Holly's mom, her dad, or any other adult that was at the barbecue that day, and they left without anyone seeing where they went. Then at around 8 p.m., Holly's mom, Nicola Wells, went up to Holly's room so she could get the girls to come down and say goodbye to the guests at the barbecue that were leaving that night. However, when she got to Holly's room, she saw that the girls were not in the room, and just like any other parent would be, she started to panic, and then she went to go get her husband to go and help out in searching for the girls. And they looked for the girls all over the house. They searched the entire house from top to bottom and even searched the nearby streets, but they just couldn't find where these girls were. Holly had an 8 p.m. curfew, and so when it came and went, her mother decided to call Jessica's house, thinking that maybe the girls decided to go over to Jessica's house instead. But when she called the Chapman residence, she found out that Jessica's parents were also wondering why Jessica hadn't come back home even though it was already so late. Then after realizing that both girls are now missing, both the families decided to call the police and report the girls missing between 9:45 and 9:55 p.m. Now, the town they lived in Soham is very small, so you know that means that everyone in the community knows each other, and therefore they also know these girls. So people came out in numbers to search for these girls once they had learned that they were missing. And then a day after their disappearance, the police held a press conference to try to talk to the public and appeal to them that if they know anything, or maybe if someone saw something, they should come forward with that information because it could help in finding these two girls. Now you see, in Soham, they lived in an area that was surrounded by woods. It was a very wooded area. So at first, the police thought that maybe the girls decided to go into the woods and play in the woods. However, they got a little bit too deep in and then couldn't find their way out of the woods, and then they just got lost. Investigators also tried tracking Jessica Chapman's phone, but it only showed them that yes, she was in Soham, but it couldn't show them specifically where in Soham she was. So this really didn't help them out. Then a woman in a nearby village reported to the police that the day after they disappeared, in the morning, she actually saw the girls walking by her front window while she was in her house. And then another person reported seeing a strange-looking white van 10 miles outside of Soham. So they decided to look into these two leads and to try to see if maybe they could lead them somewhere. Now, when they found this strange-looking white van, they searched it as much as they could, but nothing useful came out of it. Even the lead that was given to them by that woman from a nearby village couldn't exactly tell them where the girls had gone. So now the police were back at square one. Then on August 9th, CCTV footage of a local sports center actually showed that the girls were there on that day of their disappearance. So investigators thought that maybe they were going to go see someone that they knew at the local sports center, or maybe they were going to meet up with a friend of theirs they know from an online group chat. But again, this lead also didn't take them anywhere. After this, a local taxi driver in Soham contacted the police, telling them that on the day, actually on the evening of the girl's disappearance, he saw a strange looking green car that seemed to have been driving a little bit out of control on the road, and it seemed like it was struggling with two young girls. And he further told investigators that the green car drove into an estate known as the New Market. So investigators put out this information out there about this green car, urging the public to be on the lookout for this car. And then on the very same evening after the police made that announcement, a man was walking with his dog when he came across some ground that seemed a little bit strange, like it was a little bit disturbed. So thinking that this could somehow be a shallow grave, he contacted investigators to let them know what he had found. And as quickly as they could, they came out to the scene and dug and tried to see if they could find anything on this disturbed ground. However, there still wasn't any sign of Jessica and Holly. Then it was revealed that in 2001, there was an attempted kidnapping of a 6-year-old girl, but somehow she managed to escape the man who tried to kidnap her. And this man was actually driving a green car. So investigators started to think that this could have been the same situation with Jessica and Holly, because this guy in 2001 was never caught. Then on August 15th, Sky News decided to retrace the girls' steps on the day they went missing back in August 4th of 2002. And this was a man by the name of Ian Huntley. Ian Huntley worked as a caretaker at a school really close to Jessica and Holly's school, and he lived with his girlfriend who actually worked as the girls' teacher at their school in St. Andrew's Primary School. And his girlfriend's name is Maxine Carr. Now, Ian decided to get involved as soon as he heard that the girls were reported missing, and he came forward and said that the last time he saw them at around 6:15 p.m. when they left the local shop that they went to when they wanted to go buy some sweets. And because of the fact that he was the last person to see these girls before they went missing, he became the focus of a lot of media outlets out there that were covering the disappearance of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells. Ian also spoke about how shaken the community was at the sudden disappearance of these two girls and how stressed he was because of the fact that he was the last person to see Jessica and Chapman before they went missing. Ian Huntley also decided to become the unofficial spokesperson of the community of Soham, and he said that he wanted to send out a message of how frustrated the community was feeling. However, in one interview with Sky News, he actually said that he had a glimmer of hope that the girls would be found safe and sound and be returned back to their families. And he also mentioned that when he saw them, they were headed in the direction of the local library. His girlfriend Maxine also corroborated what he said, saying that yes, in fact, the girls did go past Ian's house, and as a matter of fact, they were all having a little bit of a conversation on his doorstep just before the girls left, because just before they left, she she actually went to go take a bath. She even went on to say that she actually wished that she had asked them where they were going, because had she known, or had they both known what they know now, they would have done something about it, or they would have stopped the girls before they disappeared. Maxine also mentioned the thank you card that was given to her by Holly Wells on the last day of the school year, saying that she was just lovely, really lovely. Now, what a lot of people found strange about that comment was that she was mentioning Holly Wells in the past tense, and even when she was talking about both Holly and Jessica, she kept mentioning them in the past tense, like she somehow knew something else that no one else did. Ian Huntley was actively taking part in the search for the two girls, but the weirdest thing is he kept on asking investigators how far they were with the investigation, and he was also asking questions like how long it would take for DNA evidence to start deteriorating. I mean, sure, any person would be concerned about the whereabouts of the girls, but you gotta admit, those oddly specific questions are a bit weird. Then one of the police officers even noted that Ian had 3 vertical scratches on his jaw, and he said he got those scratches because of his dog. Then on August 16th, 12 days after both Jessica and Holly were reported missing, Ian Huntley and his girlfriend Maxine Carr were questioned by police for over 7 hours, since they were the last people to see these girls before they went missing, and they both provided witness statements. However, around this time, police also started receiving information from the residents of a nearby town known as Grimsby, and they said that they recognized Ian Huntley from the TV interviews that he had been doing regarding the girls' disappearances, and some of them remembered that Ian was actually accused of sexual assault a few years earlier, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the video. And then more residents said that they actually saw Maxine Carr in Grimsby that day, on the day she said she was with Ian in his house in Soham when the girls went missing. And I gotta tell you this, Grimsby and Soham are actually 110 miles apart. So it's impossible for her to have been in Grimsby and then in Soham on the very same day. Then on the very same day of August 16th, police found remains of what looked like burned children's clothes at the Soham Village College, where Ian Huntley worked as a caretaker. Then after this, police also decided to search Ian Huntley's home, and when they did, they noted that the house actually looked very, very cleaned up. As a matter of fact, it smelled like it had been cleaned up with a lemony cleaning liquid. And while the investigation was still going on, investigators also found items of clothing that the girls were wearing when they were last seen, including the Manchester United t-shirts that they were both wearing on that day, but it looked like they were burned and cut into pieces. And these items were actually found in a bin at Ian Huntley's workplace. Investigators also found some fibers on the items of clothing, and they also found that those very same fibers matched the ones that were found on Ian Huntley's clothes as well as his body. Another thing that was discovered was that fingerprints that were found on the bin that had the burned belongings of Jessica and Holly were actually Ian Huntley's fingerprints. Ian's car also had to be examined by forensic officers. The forensic examination revealed that the car was actually very cleaned up as well. However, they did find some small traces of a mixture of brick dust, chalk, and concrete. And then it was revealed that these were the materials used to pave up the road that eventually led to where the bodies of these two girls were found. And these traces were found on the wheel arches and on the pedals of Ian Huntley's car. Then on August 17th in 2002, investigators now had all the evidence leading them to Ian Huntley. Then at 4 in the morning, both Ian Huntley and his girlfriend Maxine Carr were arrested on suspicion of murder and abduction. Now, let me give you a little bit of some background information on Ian Huntley. Ian Huntley was born on January 31st in 1974, and he was born in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. and he was the first of 2 sons. His parents are Kevin and Linda Huntley. Ian's family was a working class family, and when he was born, his parents were still living with Linda's parents. However, in 1975, when his younger brother Wayne was born, his parents then rented a property in Immingham, and that is where Ian attended school. And it was said that Ian Huntley was a bit of a mama's boy when he was growing up, but when it came to his father, he was actually very afraid of that man. Now, Ian had a pretty tough childhood growing up. He was actually bullied by a lot of the school kids that he knew at the time, and because of that, he didn't have a very good social life, and he also didn't have a lot of friends. Then when Ian was just 13 years old, his father encouraged him to join a youth organization known as the Air Training Corps. And once he became part of this organization, he started showing quite an interest in aeroplanes. And as a matter of fact, it eventually became a dream of his to be part of the Royal Air Force. And he started developing a hobby known as plane spotting. Ian finished school in 1990, but he chose not to go to university or to college. Instead, between 1990 and 1996, he just kept working some menial jobs here and there. But it was said that he couldn't hold on to one job long enough. So in those years, he kept on switching from one job to another. Then in 1994, when Ian was 20 years old, he met up with a girl by the name of Claire Evans, who was 18 years old at that time, and they became pretty close. And then after that, they started dating, and then just 2 months in their relationship, Ian proposed to Claire and they got married. But their marriage only lasted 1 week because it was said that Ian Huntley was very violent and very abusive towards Claire. And on one occasion, it was also said that Ian beat his wife up so badly that she ended up having a miscarriage. But luckily, they ended up separating, and then Ian's wife ended up getting close and actually marrying Ian Huntley's younger brother, Wayne. Now, Ian had a bit of a problematic past, to put it lightly. In March of 1996, he was charged with breaking and entering into a neighbor's home with an accomplice, where they stole some electronics, jewelry, and cash. And even though the case did go to court, because the prosecution didn't offer up any evidence, the judge ended up ordering that the case lie on file, which basically means, yes, the case can still go on, but as of now, the court doesn't believe that it's within the public interest for the prosecution of this case to proceed. Now, I don't know much about the laws in England, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Then between 1995 and 1996, it was also revealed that Ian Huntley was somehow involved in sexual relationships with young teenage girls. 3 of these girls that he was involved with were between the ages of 13 and 15. And one of the girls actually ended up falling pregnant and giving birth in 1998. However, because of the fact that each of the girls denied ever being involved in a sexual relationship with Ian Huntley, he was never charged for any of this. And now the people of the community were starting to become more and more aware of Ian Huntley's interest in young girls. And in April of 1998, he was also arrested on suspicion of sexually assaulting an 18-year-old young woman. But he defended himself by saying that yes, they did have sex, but it was completely consensual. And again, he never received any consequences for this. But then just 1 month later, he was arrested again for another incident involving the sexual assault of an 18-year-old woman who claimed that Ian Huntley attacked her while she was coming back from a local club on her way home. And the woman furthermore said that Ian threatened her, saying that he will kill her if she ever told anyone or even her mother about this. But like the previous woman, Ian said that they did have sex, but it was also completely consensual. Now, all these accusations about him being involved in sexual assault cases, as well as sexual relationships with young girls, ended up costing him his reputation, and he ended up losing his job, and he was forced to move back in with his mother, Linda Huntley, and he was also restricted from ever contacting his daughter and his daughter's mother. So now you can tell that this man actually had a pretty messed up past in the years prior. So now we're back to the present time, where he and his girlfriend Maxine have been arrested on suspicion of the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells. Now, during the interrogation, Ian Huntley was not cooperating with investigators at all. As a matter of fact, he played it off as if like he had some sort of mental illness. He was being evasive, emotionally detached, confused, and on one occasion, here and there, he was seen drooling while he was trying to speak. So once he started doing this, the police decided to send him over to a mental hospital so he can undergo extensive psychological examination. But you see, when it comes to his girlfriend Maxine, she ended up confessing to the police that in fact she did lie when she said she was with Ian on the 4th of August when the girls were reported missing. And as a matter of fact, the residents of Grimsby who did say that they saw her in the town on that day were actually right. She was in fact in Grimsby and she didn't go back to Soham until 3 days later. She also went on to say that just before she came back to Soham, Ian sent her a text message saying, "Thing is, Maxine, they came into our house." Now, according to Maxine, she said that Ian told her that the girls came into the house when Holly had a nosebleed. Then he told her that Jessica was sitting on the bed while he was attempting to help Holly control her nosebleed. He then started to tell Maxine about the sexual assault charges and accusations that he had back in the 90s, and he told her about how they had a negative effect on him, and so he was afraid that if he ever came forward about the truth, the public and the police wouldn't believe him. And apparently he suffered some sort of nervous breakdown because of what happened back in the 1990s. So because of those accusations, Maxine decided to help him create this fake story and also support his version of events. Then once the police showed her all the evidence that they found, which showed Ian's involvement in the disappearance and the murder of Jessica and Holly, Maxine just broke into tears. She just couldn't believe that Ian could have possibly had anything to do with this. As a matter of fact, she refused to believe that he had anything to do with this, and she spent quite a lot of time professing his innocence, not only to the police, but also to her own family. And on August 20th in 2002, investigators believed that they had collected enough evidence to formally charge Ian Huntley with 2 counts of murder. And at this point, he was still being held at the Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire. And all preliminary hearings against him had to be put on hold until they could make conclusions on his mental state assessments. His girlfriend Maxine Carr was charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice, and she was also charged with assisting an offender. Maxine was held at the Holloway prison, and while she was there, she kept on trying to ask about how Ian was and how he was doing. And it was also said that she still kept on sending him letters professing her love and her support for him. Then it was later determined that even though Ian Huntley was a psychopath, he never suffered any major mental or psychotic illness. Then on October 8th, he was deemed fit to stand trial. He was then transferred from the mental hospital to a segregation unit at Woodhill Prison in Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire. On June 9th in 2003, Ian Huntley attempted to take his own life by overdosing on 29 antidepressant pills. But he was unsuccessful in doing this, and then just 48 hours later, he was taken back to his prison cell, and then after that, he was later transferred to London's Belmarsh prison. A preliminary hearing was held at the Old Bailey on June 16th in 2003, and he pleaded not guilty to the murder of Jessica and Holly. However, he pleaded guilty to the charge of attempting to pervert the course of justice. His girlfriend pleaded not guilty to attempting to pervert the course of justice, and she also pleaded not guilty to the charge of assisting an offender. The prosecutor, Richard Latham, argued that Ian Huntley lured the girls into his home at around 6:37 p.m. and then murdered them shortly after. A cell-site analysis showed that Huntley turned off Jessica's phone either outside his home or on the grounds of the Soham village shortly after he murdered them. The prosecutor also talked about how the bodies of the young girls were found by a man named Keith Pryor and his 2 friends, and they found these bodies in a place that was actually restricted to the public, and Ian Huntley knew about this because he would often go there for his plane spotting hobby that I talked about in the beginning. So he knew that if he dumped the bodies there, it would become almost impossible for anyone to find them anytime soon. And because of the girls' advanced states of decomposition, it could not be determined for a fact what their cause of death was, and it also couldn't be determined if they had been in fact sexually assaulted. But when the bodies were examined by the coroner, there were no signs of stab wounds, pressure injuries on the neck, poisoning, or even drugging. And so because of this, the prosecutor raised the idea that these girls most likely died of asphyxiation. The prosecution also argued that Maxine Carr helped Ian Huntley take away any suspicion from him. It was also mentioned that Ian went to great efforts to get rid of any physical and circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. But despite those efforts, investigators were still able to get enough evidence to prove his involvement in the disappearance and the murder of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells. And it was actually said that he actually murdered them inside of his home, and then within 12 hours after their death, he transported them to the location where their bodies were found. And the evidence collected included the fibers that were found in his car, on his carpets, and on his clothes, and it was said that these were actually a precise match to the Manchester United t-shirts that the girls were wearing when they were last seen alive. Forensic evidence also revealed that there were traces of minute blood found on the girls' clothing, footwear, as well as on a cloth that was found at Ian's workplace on August 17th in 2002. However, no traces of semen could ever be found on the girls' clothing, but it was said that this could have been because of the fact that these items were found quite burned up. Investigators also found traces of blood spatter on Ian Huntley's hallway, as well as on the main entrance to his bedroom. So basically, no matter how hard he tried to hide the evidence, he obviously didn't try hard enough. On December 1st in 2003, Ian Huntley took the stand to defend himself. He said that yes, Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells did die in his house, but it was purely accidental. He said they were all in his bedroom while he was helping Holly with her nosebleed. He also mentioned that his bathtub was also filled up with water because he had been cleaning his dog at that time. Then while he was in the bathroom with Holly, he accidentally slipped and then knocked her into the bathtub where she ended up drowning. And then according to him, he couldn't do anything because he just panicked and froze. And then he said that while Holly was drowning, Jessica started screaming at him, saying that he pushed her. So in an attempt to silence her screams, he also unintentionally suffocated her. And then once he realized that both the girls were dead, he didn't call emergency services soon after that because he was too panicked and worried about what could happen once the police and the public know about this, and that he was also worried that they would never believe him when he told them that Jessica and Holly's deaths were simply just accidental. On December 17th in 2003, the trial came to an end, and the jury deliberated for 4 days before coming back with a verdict on the charges of Ian Huntley and his girlfriend Maxine Carr. Ian Huntley was found guilty on 2 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to a life term in prison with a minimum of 40 years. And he showed no emotions when his verdict was being announced, even though Jessica and Holly's mothers were seen breaking into tears when the verdict was announced. And even though Maxine Carr was found guilty of attempting to pervert the course of justice, she was not found guilty of assisting an offender, and the jury accepted her explanation that the reason she lied for Ian was because she still believed he was innocent before they got arrested. So with that being said, she was not found guilty of assisting an offender, and she was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, but she was released after only having served 21 months in prison. And then once she was released, she was given a new identity. Now, when it comes to why he killed the 2 girls, it couldn't be determined for sure what his true motive was. But it was discovered that just before the girls were murdered, Ian and Maxine were actually in a heated argument over the phone because Ian was suspecting that Maxine was cheating on him. And so as they were arguing like this, he ended up slamming the telephone down, and that's when he saw the two girls walking by his house, and that's when he decided to lure them into his house. And so in a fit of jealousy and rage, he took out all that he was feeling on these two young girls. But again, this was just a theory by investigators about what his true motive was. But a criminal psychologist classified Ian Huntley as a talented, predatory pedophile, and that he lured these two girls into his home upon a moment of opportunity. After the convictions, one of the parents, Leslie Chapman, said, "I think he was a time bomb waiting to go off, and both our girls were at the wrong place at the wrong time. I hope the next time I see him, it'll be like how we saw our daughters, in a coffin." But yeah guys, that was the heartbreaking case of the disappearance and murders of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells. Guys, they were just 11 years old. I just cannot believe that anyone could be so messed up that they could do this to children. But in my heart of hearts, I sincerely hope that Jessica and Holly are resting in peace, and that their families, even though they suffered a great loss that no parent should ever have to experience, they found some closure in knowing that the monster who did this to their girls will forever be locked up in prison for the rest of his miserable life. Rest in peace to these beautiful little angels, Jessica Amy Chapman and Holly Marie Wells. But that is all that I have for you guys for today's episode. Please do let me know what you think about it in the comment section. And if you did enjoy the episode, please do leave it a thumbs up by pressing the like button, because that would seriously help me out. And thank you guys once again for chilling with me today. And as always, I appreciate you more every day for your support. And if you are new here, please be part of the family and subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. That being said, I will see you guys in the next episode. So until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.